There he is. Hi, John. Okay, we were just taking roll. We have everyone here, so let's jump right in. We have 4 items on our agenda today, and I'm really pleased to be able to start with the introduction of the Spark Project Director, John Paralysi. We went through an exhaustive process to find the right person to help lead us from a staff perspective as an executive committee. And we're really pleased to find a match with John Paralysi. And John, we'd like you to perhaps introduce yourself and give some background on your work, and we'll talk a little bit about the future. So, John.
Hi, thank you very much for bringing me on board and giving me an opportunity to meet all of you this week and to speak on the session. My name is John Paralysi. My background is as a strategist at McKinsey for a number of years, and I've been a strategist in the industry for about 20 years since then. So when it comes to really helping organizations think about how to widen their focus against what they could be or do in the future, and then take what comes from that and really prioritize and figure out how to make that happen to create a better future. That's really, in a nutshell, been what I've been focused on. For about the last 15 years, I've been focusing on the innovation space. With about 10 years of that, I was the chief strategy officer for Balfour Beatty Construction, which is a major commercial construction company in Dallas. I still live in Dallas, but the opportunity to help on this project and to help this group and the people of Kansas was just a great opportunity to be able to apply my skills to something that could make a difference. So thanks again.
Well, John, thank you. And again, we're so pleased to have found a professional of your caliber with your unique set of experiences and your background. I think it's going to be a great fit with our committee, and particularly pleased at your outreach this week to visit with each of the members of the committee and start to get, you've jumped right in. And so we're grateful for that. We've got a lot of work to do, and I'm excited to have you on board. So thanks very much.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
John, hey, I had a great conversation with you this week and really excited you're part of this, but I got to know, is that stack of papers or books behind you a prop, or you still got a lot of reading to do before the day's over?
This is a conference room. This isn't my office, but I'm sure that may represent the stack of papers I'll have in pretty short order.
It looks almost dangerous. Does anyone else have any comments or questions for John before we move on to our next agenda item? Okay, well, our next agenda item is COVID-19 testing funding extension. Pleased first to report that yesterday the State Finance Council voted unanimously to approve our recommendation for, in this case, it wound up being $14.9 million to support testing through the end of December. You'll recall from the last meeting that we had in Kansas City, Kansas, we'd approved what we estimated at that time to be a reallocation of about $11 million from the CRF, the CARES Act dollars. And as the committee had recommended, we went out, looked for other opportunities to reallocate dollars. We were ultimately able to come up with not 11, but 14.9 total in reallocations. And so that recommendation from us was approved unanimously by the State Finance Council, which takes care of the testing contracts through the end of the year. So now we need to make sure that we can continue that through the end of the first quarter of 2022. And I'm pleased that we've got Myron Gonzalez with us here today who can talk about what's in this proposal. So Myron.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you all for taking the time to visit with us again. The ask that today presented that's before you is the balance of the 42 million that we originally requested. That is the amount that would be needed to see us from now, really December 1st through March 31st, to cover just two major areas that are we needed to give the state of Kansas a little more a runway to get through the winter. The first is employer testing, which this is not the OSHA employer testing, the required on every, all employee type thing. This is we had originally, as you'll recall, had requested, had offered and agreed to test around 10% of an employer's staff, if they so desired, every couple of weeks. So for those employers who have already been registered in the program, we would like to extend that through March 31st. That's the big chunk of this request. The balance of the request is for community testing. This is to continue 9, maybe 10 mass testing sites throughout the state. And those are kind of basically free testing, free PCR testing, walk-up sites or drive-up sites. And then also to continue supporting community testing partners. These are in close to 80 to 90 counties have at least one or two of these partners that are available for people to walk in, get an antigen test, which is the less expensive test, right there on the spot. And then we provide that test to them. If we could extend these two programs through March 31st, we feel like it was requested of us, and we think it'd be a good thing for the state of Kansas. And that is that, so the 14.9, the balance of that is around roughly 27.1 million that we're asking for from the ARPA funds to supplement that testing until March 31st.
And Myron, two clarifying questions. Number one, it's up to 27.1. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's not guaranteed to use all of it. We've got a little bit of extra in there just in case there's another surge similar to the Delta. If the Omicron were to hit really hard in January, there's a little buffer in there that would be able to help us manage through that. Yes, sir, if we needed it. We would not take it if we don't need it.
Good, thank you. And second question, can you talk a little bit about the FEMA reimbursement process, where we are with that, and what that would mean, assuming that we are reimbursed?
Yes, sir. So as we've mentioned last time, and as you all put into the motion last time, we have requested FEMA in August changed their rules and allowed for us to request reimbursement for the testing that we are doing, any testing costs that we are doing. And so we did put together a package for FEMA and have submitted that. We submitted it in October. It has made it fairly rapidly, they tell me, we've used outside consultants who are doing this for several other states, and that has made it through the process fairly rapidly to the point it's at, but it still may take another month or two before we hear back from them on whether that reimbursement will come. That will be reimbursement for testing for this year, and could see us through reimbursement for costs into March or April 22.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Questions about the testing proposal from the executive committee?
I have a quick one, Lieutenant Governor.
Yes, Mr. President.
So, and this is more around on the logistics of it, because we had conversations in the last meeting, and this came being more of a loan situation, if you will, because of the FEMA reimbursement. So my question is, and by the way, thank you for providing that updated information on the potential reimbursement. That being, the request for reimbursement was like 131 million, I think, in total for everything. Is that pot of money, since it's federal money, going to come back through the Spark Committee, or at least the 27 million, if not the entire pot? Is that something that will expand what we are going to be dealing with if we get that money in for these purposes? And that might be for you,
Yeah.
or Office of Recovery.
Yeah. I think my understanding is that is to reimburse basically some of the funding that we've used from KDHE out of the CDC funds that we've been given, or to reimburse the Spark Committee for basically this ARPA loan or the CRF loan. I would look to Secretary Burns-Wallace might be able to clarify even more, but that's my understanding. This would be basically, I think most of this would come back to KDHE to cover the testing costs, because the funds that KDHE has used give us, they're set to be used for about 2 or 3 years, like into 23 and 24. And so if we can reimburse ourselves with some of those funds, it allows us to continue doing in-house testing, because we suspect there will be some COVID testing needed next year too. Hopefully not anywhere near what we're doing now, but we do expect we're going to have to do some of it.
And President Masterson, typically the way when a reimbursement comes in, those dollars have to still be used along the same original guidelines for which they are being reimbursed. And it's also, so when it comes back, they usually have the stipulations on them, or they revert back to whatever the original stipulations were around eligibility or allowability. But we can pull the specific language and make sure we recirculate it to the group. So ideally, they would still need to be used around or for something related to testing that lined up with whatever the allowability is granted, either under FEMA or under the original dollars that it's being reimbursed for. Does that help?
It does. So I think really the core of my question, giving that information, is that decision, at least on the 27 million, then going to be the Spark Committee's decision? Because that was money we are putting into the system. It reimburses to KDHE, and I understand that if it's stipulated around testing, but is that a decision for the Spark Committee or for KDHE?
So I think, I guess it may be a conversation point of like, so if the Spark Committee is loaning the dollars and would like those dollars to come back to the Spark Committee, the amount that is then used for testing could come here because those are still non-discretionary. So those could be used broader. Some of the other reimbursement that's coming back that was tied directly to dollars that could only be used for testing can then only going forward could be used for testing. So yes, I think my answer is kind of yes, there would still be flexibility in, let's say if the 27.1 million is completely used, right? That
answers.
Okay, thank you.
Just for clarity, would it be reasonable for us to assume that if FEMA were to reduce this request to a lower amount, that the first 27 million would come back to the fiscal recovery fund? Meaning that if you only got $50 million from FEMA, that 27 would come to us first.
Secretary Burns-Wallace, do you know the answer to that?
I don't. I don't. I don't know. I guess it would be more of a discussion point or a decision point at that point.
By the Spark Committee?
I'm not sure we know, Bill.
Sorry, I apologize. I didn't realize it was a question. Bill, you're on mute. There you go.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, do we get our money back no matter? I mean, FEMA can do whatever they're going to do with our request. I just want to make sure that if we, the first 27 million that the state gets goes back to the fiscal recovery fund, and then the rest of it goes back. I assume that most of this money was CARES funds that was spent by the first Spark Committee anyway. So it's all, is it not?
So if you go back to the backgrounder that was part of the packet, it came from multiple sources. And so there's ELC funds and CARES. And so it's larger CARES, there were CRF, there were ELC, there were CDC. So it was multiple buckets of funds, but yeah. Yes. So, and I guess the answer would be if the stipulation of this committee in terms of making the dollars available would be when and if a FEMA reimbursement came back, that those dollars were then replaced to Spark, then it would follow along accordingly. So I think it would have to just be a part of, if that was part of the recommendation or if that was part of what was determined or requested by this group for the dollars that are given to this for this purpose.
Yeah, I think that Lieutenant Governor, this is Greg Orman. I think from my perspective, any allocation of dollars here has to come very specifically with that stipulation that when FEMA reimburses that $27.1 million or whatever is ultimately spent does get reimbursed, along with any unspent testing funds that come out of this 27.1 million, that those get reimbursed back to Spark. As it relates to other FEMA reimbursements, I think here is where we may have a conflict between federal and state law, because my understanding is the way the legislation was written around federal relief related funding, those dollars are supposed to flow back into Spark. Now, if the federal government has a stipulation that says otherwise as a condition to getting those dollars back, then obviously we're going to have to follow the federal rule. But my expectation would be any dollars that come back would be allocated in accordance with state law, unless there was some federal law that preempted it. And so I sort of believe, President Masterson, to your point, we should not only get back the 27.1 million, but we should probably get back more of those dollars as well. And I think it would be incumbent upon this committee to make sure we pursue that vigorously. I have one question, which is in the materials that we were sent, it referenced the fact that since the establishment of the unified testing strategy, lower cost models for testing and targeted federal support for some populations offer the opportunity to lower the unit cost of testing for the state. And then references KDHE as pursuing those changes in parallel. Can someone unpack that for me? What does that mean? What's the time frame for that? How many? What are we talking about in terms of lower cost models? Is this 5% lower, 50% lower? It seemed to be sort of buried in the material that we got, but might actually be meaningful in terms of the dollars involved.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Mr. Orman. Essentially there were 5 levers that we pulled, or 4 levers that we pulled to as we've stated earlier, basically with the Delta surge, it depleted the funds that we had been using, federal funds that we had been using to pay for the COVID testing. So as we approached that, we approached it with 4 different ways of reducing our costs. One way, the first way was to shift away from paying for any and all testing by any, through our contract laboratories. The second way was with our long-term care facilities. We had been paying for PCR testing for all of our long-term care facilities, just any sort of testing they wanted to do. Mostly a lot of it had to do with surveillance testing for staff and residents. And the federal partners have come up with they have a free option for that now, available to all of the long-term care as well as congregate living facilities through a regional contract called through Battelle. A little more, and maybe too much detail for you right now, but anyway, so we can shift. So one of our options was to shift from contract lab testing just through our own payments to this federal partner that's at no cost to the state or to the long-term care facility for their surveillance testing. The third was our mass testing sites. These are we had about 12 or 14 still operational. Several of those were less than 10 or 15 sample patients a day. So we closed some of those to save the money. And we also then, for the higher volume ones, we contracted, we got temporary agency staff and rented our own site boxes and are running those ourselves using and testing that through the state laboratory. The state laboratory does have the flexibility to be a little bit less expensive than our contract laboratories, because a lot of the work that we've already done a lot of what we have is already in place. So we can do it without having an actual expense out there. So that was, and the fourth one was with our community testing partners. These are like pharmacies and local health departments who were doing, we offered them to do both antigen, which is the rapid simple test, it's about $5, and the PCR, and they would send it into our contract labs. Well, we pulled back the contract labs. So we said we want all of our CTPs, our community testing partners, to do just antigen. But we made sure that every county has a PCR option, so the PCR, of course, is considered the gold standard, and it's more expensive. So we reduced that cost from the PCR test down to the $5 sample test. So those four things together are what contributed to our ability to start to see some to stopping the cost, lowering the cost, and allow us to get through March with just the 42 million, as opposed to the 3 to 6 million a month we were spending. Well, it was even more than that. In September, it's closer to 10 to 14 million a month that we were spending for all of that PCR testing. So those are the big areas where we've made the changes that addressed in the backgrounder.
Okay. And so we're at a point where we've made the changes. Those are not sort of ongoing or being pursued in parallel, but the changes have been implemented. And so we should expect a lower cost per test going forward.
Yes, sir. And we've already, several of them we've implemented fully, like we've already taken over the mass testing sites, and that has reduced our costs immediately. The long-term care facilities are still in transition, and the community testing partners are still in transition, but we are not paying the contract labs right now. So they're still figuring out how they're going to do that. But yes, sir.
Are there any further questions on the testing proposal?
Lieutenant Governor, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Kind of to dovetail a little bit the conversation we're having as far as the reimbursement or even the money from this, it does highlight the unanswered question we have on the control of the federal money. I think Greg Orman referenced that as being in conflict with how we're doing things. And so that really needs to be resolved because, we have about $480 million of money for testing that was given directly to the department that by state law should have went through this committee. And now we're asked for additional funds, which I believe everybody on this panel is in favor of. But just the coordination and discussion between that, it's going to continue to happen as we look at healthcare and childcare and housing, all the things we've talked about. We really need to get our arms around how we're going to go forward with reconciling that state law that was signed last year that said the federal money in after basically July 1st would run through Spark if it's deals with COVID. So I don't think it's to answer Bill Pickard's question. I think it's a question. The money that comes back from FEMA goes directly to the Spark committee. That's what the state law says. So when a motion's made, I do hope it's clarified that the money does come back, especially the testing money. But it shouldn't be necessary because it'd be consistent with state law. But the conflict's going to continue because again, we had $480 million for testing that we should have had a say in to discuss, but now we're asked at a late date to supplement that. And again, I just think going forward, I know we tried earlier, we worked with the governor's office to try to come up with a way to do it. I think I stalled out, but I think this highlights the need to continue those conversations and try to satisfy state law with what we're trying to do to continue this process.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think what's clear and hasn't gotten stalled out is that the $27.1 million that we're requesting today, I hope that there will be a motion that states that 27.1 million will come back if and when we have a FEMA reimbursement, that will come back to the Spark committee for its use for other purposes.
Yeah, I agree with that and hope that's included, but it's really not necessary. It's the law, but it only should anyway. But when the motion's made, that needs to be included, and I'm willing to make that motion if it's time.
I think it's time.
Thank you. Well, I move that we appropriate the money and that when the reimbursement comes in, it goes back to the Spark committee for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I'd like to clarify that includes reimbursement of any dollars that were allocated through the Spark process, whether it have been our current committee or the committee of 2020.
Referring to the CARES Act dollars?
Yeah, any dollars allocated through the Spark process. And so I've only been on since January, and the Spark process was prior to me. But if there's reimbursement of dollars that were allocated through the Spark process, I just wanted to clarify that was part of Ron's motion.
Okay. I think I understand the motion. So I don't know all the legalities here. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, are you comfortable with the president's tweak to the motion?
I am. What I was referencing was the change in law with the new funds that came in, not the past funds, but I did not have any issue with the changes that the president's talking about. It does grab a little more than what I was referring to, but I am comfortable with it. And so I would include that in our motion, that any reimbursement that comes from FEMA would also come through this process.
Okay, got it. So we have a motion and a second discussion on the motion, and I might ask Secretary Burns Wallace just to make sure, understand, you've been involved on both Sparks, as have I. So from a mechanical perspective, does this work going retroactively to the CARES Act dollars? I'm clear on ARPA, but I just am not prior to that.
So if I understand the motion correctly, it's that if there are any funds that are reimbursed that hit the any of the Spark processes, that those monies come back to the current Spark processes for discussion, approval, reallocation. Is that, I just want to make sure I was stating it correctly as well. Okay, I see President Masters' thumbs up. And I would say that, in theory, I would say yes. I think the caveat will be if there are any particular, this is where I think the conversation was before around some of the federal things. I don't think it's an issue where we'd have to look at is when those dollars came back to Spark, making sure that this Spark committee was aware of if any of those dollars had any allowability or guardrails attached to it in the reimbursement form. And like, for instance, anything that would be CRF related specifically, which was a portion of CARES, it still has a timeline of when expenses could have been spent, but you still can reallocate them into the future. So there might be some of those administrative caveats to it, but I think in theory, conceptually, the idea that if there are any dollars that are reimbursed that came through the Spark process originally, that this Spark committee would want to see those again for reallocation or redistribution administratively in general, I think is viable.
Okay, got it. And with the understanding that dollars that were specified for a purpose under federal law or federal regs have to continue to be used for that purpose going forward, right? So if we get a reimbursement doesn't mean that we've got full discretion on how those reimbursed dollars can be spent. Is that correct?
Unless they were originally non-discretionary.
Unless they're right.
One is a great example. It was non-discretionary. If it comes back, it can still be non-discretionary. So just with that caveat, just for clarification, but yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, further discussion or questions related to the motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the vote. President Masterson?
Aye.
Speaker Reichman?
Aye.
Secretary Burns Wallace?
Aye.
Mr. Orman?
Aye.
Mr. Pickert?
Aye.
Mr. Rolfe?
Aye.
And chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we have the 24/7 state employee pay plan. Pleased that we have Budget Director Adam Proffitt here with us today to present this proposal. Director Proffitt.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor. Appreciate the invitation. Before I get too far into it, can you give me a thumbs up that you can hear me, please? Very good. As Lieutenant Governor stated, I'm the Director of the Budget for the state of Kansas. My name is Adam Proffitt. I'm going to walk through a proposal that you all should have received within the last few days. The request is to provide funding to get a pay plan going for 24/7 facilities. And if it's okay with the chair, I think it'll take me about 10 minutes to walk through this. If you can stand listening to me for about 10 minutes straight, it might be easiest to just let me go through it. and I can handle any remaining questions at the end. So I'm going to share my screen, assuming I know how to do that. And if I can get another thumbs up when that happens, maybe from John Rolfe, since he's the only person I can see now. Very good. Okay, on the cover page here, this really kind of talks about the design of the program, and I'll get into some of the specifics. So as you likely know, Governor Kelly did announce a new pay initiative to assist the 24/7 facilities that are experiencing really critical staffing shortages. And when I say critical staffing shortages, we're talking vacancy rates upwards of 25, 35, 40% in some instances. And these are in facilities that truly need close to full employment to be able to assist the populations that they do. It is going to hit the Department of Corrections, KDADs at the state hospitals, and then the Commission on Veterans Affairs. So this is, with the staffing shortages that we have right now, it really is a public safety concern with corrections. And then the populations that are being served at the state hospitals and then certainly at the veterans homes are truly in need of the care. And we're trying to solve some of the shortages here. You might have also seen a couple of press releases lately from some surrounding states. Kansas is certainly not unique in our situation in that we're short in these positions. But our neighbors are starting to take action on this, and that's where the governor's plan came into play. So we do have hyperlinks provided to the Nebraska pay plan, which they announced back in October. And then you might have heard Governor Parsons just announced a plan within the last week in Missouri to address really state employment across the state. The request that we're putting in front of you today, bottom line up front, the total funding we're looking at is $30.3 million. And this is all for fiscal 22. Assuming it moves into fiscal 23, we will take a different strategy in the budget office and look at different options. But given where we're at and the fact that it's a very immediate need, we're coming to the Spark Committee for help so that we can get the funding going and pull all of the triggers that we've laid out in front of you. So of the $30.3 million, that is broken up across really three main areas. Within the hourly employees, there's two buckets. There's a base pay increase for all KDOC or Department of Corrections specific job classes and 24/7 nursing staff. That cost is $6.44 million for the balance of fiscal 22. Within the hourly employees, we also have a different strategy. There's some pay differentials, which are really premium pay, and those all have a different cost associated with each of them, and I'll get into the details on subsequent slides. For the salaried employees at these facilities, we had to handle a little bit differently to avoid any issues with FLSA and making sure that we're square there, and that comes at a cost of $1.6 million. Obviously, we're looking for the fiscal recovery funds that this committee is doling out, so looking for support here. And then it gets into the rationale, which I think we've spoken to. But again, this is a critical need. It's an immediate need, and we're trying to make some meaningful change on the pay structure to assist with the staff shortages. There's also a hyperlink here to an FAQ page from the feds that talks about the guidance where we feel that this is certainly allowable use of these funds. So moving on to page 2, the next several pages are going to look very similar, but I'll point out the key differences as we move through them. This one here sets the stage for all of the different levers that we're trying to pull, and I'll kind of walk through it slowly. So this is for hourly employees. You can see here in the top right. Going forward, in effect, anything that's in gold has largely already been implemented, and we're kind of self-funding that right now until we get backup funding, and that's permanent. So this base pay increase here is permanent, again, for all KDOC specific job classes and nursing staff at 24/7 facilities. And when I say nursing staff, that would be RNs, APRNs, CNA, LPNs, any other nursing staff with different initials that I did not hit. The cost for fiscal 22 is $6.44 million. And we do show a cost for fiscal 23, but again, this request is focused simply on fiscal 22. So anything in gold largely has taken effect and will be permanent. Anything in blue is temporary and will be used as needed for different classes and has not yet been implemented. As you saw on the previous page, the dollar amount associated with these levers is much larger than the base pay increase. So we wanted to ensure that we had the funding in place before we pulled the trigger. So again, we had the base pay increase kind of across the board. There's separate differentials for different types of staff. And I think as I walk through the next several pages, it'll become more clear who is eligible for what differential at what point in time. So that's the hourly employees and then the costs associated with them. If we move to the page 3 in your deck, this is what we're looking at for salaried employees. So again, to avoid any run-ins with the FLSA, we're looking at providing one-time premium pay of $3,500, $3,500 for all salaried employees at the 24/7 facilities. That would be 327 employees. This number is not an arbitrary number. We are calling it premium pay, but it looks similar enough to what we would call a bonus on the state side that we're trying to follow state statute as it relates to bonuses. State statute is rather restrictive and prescriptive on how bonuses can be assigned. That's the maximum amount that we can allocate through a bonus on the state side in one fiscal year. So it's premium pay, and that's what we're moving forward with, but we want to ensure that we're satisfying both state and federal guidance on that. And this is coming at a cost of $1.6 million in fiscal 22. So if we move to page 3, I will walk you through an example of one particular job classification and how each of the buckets are going to impact them or not impact them, depending on where they sit. So the example that we have on the screen here is for, we call it a CO1A, Corrections Officer 1A within Department of Corrections. It's effectively the entry-level corrections officer that walks in starting their career with Department of Corrections as a corrections officer. So again, anything in this goldenrod or maize color is permanent and it's already been implemented. So the base pay trigger has already been pulled for all KDOC specific job classes. The way we implemented that with a CO1A at Department of Corrections is we actually left the starting salary where it was of $18.26. We felt when we looked at this and worked with the secretary and the teams, it felt like we were able to get enough qualified applicants to start, but we are losing them very quickly. So instead of changing the starting salary, we put escalators in at some key milestones early to incentivize folks to stick around and really earn that next level. So with the CO1A, the base salary increase was a 2.5% increase after 3 months on the job, and then another 2.5% increase after 9 months on the job. And then at 12 months on the job, you're actually moving into a different job title. So there's another 5% increase above and beyond what's in place today. So within a 12-month period, you're receiving 2.5% increases and a 5% increase. So effectively a little bit better than a 10% increase after a 12-month time frame. Really hoping to incentivize folks to stay around. So that's the base pay increase at a CO1A. The different differentials that we have in place hit different job classifications and different facilities. So differential 1 in blue here, again, blue means it's temporary, and we have not yet implemented this change as a part of the announcement. We need this funding to be able to do this. Differential 1 is going to hit all 24/7 facility staff. So anybody that works in a 24/7 facility, whether it's nursing or corrections or the veterans home, is going to get this one. This is $1.50 an hour for all 24/7 facility staff. So if anybody, so the CO1A here, if they work for 3 months and their pay goes up 2.5%, they also get the $1.50 differential on top of that. You can see in here that they do get the $1.50. Differential 2 is specific to KDOC Corrections uniform security staff only. So that is the only group of employees we're talking about with differential 2. So this CO1A in this example, again, it's temporary, will receive an additional $2 per hour differential pay on top of the $1.50 and on top of their base pay. So an incremental $2 an hour. So as we move up, these are beginning to stack on top of each other, again, to work towards meaningful change. Differential 3 is specific to all 24/7 facility nursing staff. So the nursing staff, the job titles that I spoke of earlier that work at a 24/7 facility, whether it's corrections, the veterans homes, the state hospitals, they would receive an incremental $4.50 an hour while this lever is being pulled. Because the CO1A is not a nursing individual, they are not eligible for this $4.50 differential. So that's excluded from this example. Then differential 4, as you move up, again, stacks on top. This is for 24/7 facilities designated as critical staffing levels. So the way we are defining critical staffing levels is if that particular facility has a 25% or higher vacancy rate at the time that this is pulled. So if we're able to make some meaningful change here and bulk up the staff and the vacancy rate shrinks down to 18%, for example, this one goes away. But in many of the facilities right now, we're far exceeding the 25% vacancy rate. So any of the staff that are there and having to deal with short staff and the extra duties, we're recognizing that with an additional $2.50 while this differential is in play. So to see what the impact would be, again, we talked about a CO1A walking in the door, their starting pay is $18.26 an hour. If they get differential 1 at $1.50 an hour, plus differential 2 at an incremental $2 an hour, plus differential 4 at an incremental $2.50 an hour, you can see what their new salary is going to be if they stack everything. And then if you add the 2.5% increases at 3 months and 9 months, you can see what their salaries will be in that situation. So going from $18.26 an hour all the way up to sometimes $25.16 an hour, we feel like is meaningful change and something that will really entice folks to stick around, and we might be able to make an impact in a very short period of time. So that's a CO1A. We have examples for the other job classifications. Here's a corrections officer 2, which is effectively somebody with more experience. I won't walk through this one because it's very similar as a CO1A, just with different starting salaries and ending salaries. If we move to the next page, this is the mental health and developmentally disabled technicians, or the MHDD techs. They are included in this as well because they're working largely at the state hospitals. So again, the goldenrod being a permanent base pay increase is already in effect. You can see their starting salary at $16.16 an hour. They were recently increased to that level from something that was frankly quite below that and was very, very difficult to recruit. They would get this first differential 1 because it's at a 24/7 facility. They do not get differential 2 because they are not corrections uniform security staff. They do not get differential 3 because this level does not qualify for nursing staff, but they do get differential 4 should they work in a facility that is designated as a high vacancy level. So in this situation, they go from $16.16 an hour today, and again, it was much below that just a few months ago, up to $20.16 an hour if these two differentials are in place. And the last example that I will walk through with you is for a registered nurse. Could also be for a CNA and LPN, an APRN. So again, same type of slide setup. The goldenrod or maze down here is permanent and it's in place today. Had the starting pay increased. So starting salary for an RN right now is $30.80 an hour. They're getting that today. With differential 1, because they work in a 24/7 facility, they get that as soon as we pull that lever, and that's an incremental $1.50 per hour. They do not get differential 2 because they are not corrections uniform security staff. However, when you get to differential 3, they are 24/7 facility nursing staff, so they get the additional $4.50 per hour. And if they happen to work at a facility designated as a high vacancy above that 25% threshold, they'll also get the $2.50 per hour. So in this situation, if all the differentials were layered, this individual would be up to $39.30 per hour. Again, the goldenrod being permanent, the goal would be for the blue ones to back off in time as we're able to beef up the staffing of these facilities. And Mr. Chairman, I believe that is all that I was going to walk through. One note I did forget on the first page, so I'll go back to it, is the numbers that we have in here for the differentials. We view those as sort of the maximum amount that we would need for the balance of the fiscal year. Meaning, if in every one of those situations that I just walked through, we had that lever pulled starting, next week and carried that through the end of the fiscal year, those are the amounts that we would see that we would need for the balance of the fiscal year in fiscal 22. That's why they're so large. Ideally, again, the goal would be to specifically with the high vacancy ones to be able to back off of that so we can have more staff in there and spread the workload across others. And Lieutenant Governor, I believe that covers everything I wanted to touch on, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Director Profit. We appreciate you taking us through this step by step. Questions from the Executive Committee? I might just kick it off. So I was curious on registered nurses as an example. So significant increase if all of the eligible differentials kick in from the current starting salary at $30.80 an hour up to a potential $39.30 an hour. Just wondering, how does that compare to the broader market for RNs? Are we going to be competitive at that level? I mean, this is clearly a significant increase, but does it get it done? What's our degree of confidence there?
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Very good question. The short answer is it will likely be a little bit below what the market is currently. There are varying degrees of nursing rates depending on what type of facility you're in and what role you're playing. Just as a data point, the average traveling nurse right now is roughly $48 an hour. So you can see even close to 40, we're not going to be at 48. Now, a traveling nurse may not have the fringe benefit that comes along with working at a state job with the insurance and everything else. But yeah, we're going to be a little bit below market, but $30 versus 48 an hour is quite a stretch and likely difficult to recruit against. Once you get closer to 40 to 48, maybe you're more in the ballpark of being able to pull folks in.
Okay, gives us a fighting chance.
Sure.
Okay.
So
yeah, Masterson.
So the goldenrod, the already implemented portion of that, what funds were allocated for that from the administration at this point? Is that just SGF, or do you have other federal dollars you were using there? Because it looks, the total amount we're talking about looks like we're planning to reimburse that with ARPA funds, that part that's already implemented and locked in.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Very good question. What we're doing right now, quite candidly, is using existing agency resources. We do need to find a way to backfill that money, though, because it's, as you know, agencies get their allotment of SGF, and then so they have cash flow right now. But if we get another month, 6 weeks, 7 weeks down the road, agencies might not be able to sustain that. So wanted to make sure that this was part of the request to get something to backfill them quickly so that we do not run into any cash flow issues.
Had you planned for a supplemental request to the legislature here in the next month when we come back in, if this were not to pass?
There are a number of options that we discussed, and certainly some contingencies that we could work through. But again, with the need being immediate and with this being in place right now, as well as I do, better than I do likely, that even with a supplemental bill that gets introduced, we're looking at February for passage and a couple of weeks for enrollment, and then we're into maybe March. So this feels like the most expedient way to get the funds there to ensure that we're hitting the targets that we want to.
And your anticipation is just to request in the end what you're actually obligated for. The balance would remain with us. That's an up to approval.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It'd be an up to, because those might not be the maximum. We'd like to get the entirety of that right now, assuming we're going to pull all those triggers. Certainly happy to report as we move through to see what we spent.
Just a handful of questions, and maybe the first is an observation, which is must be a state of Kansas government thing, because it's the first time I've heard the word goldenrod used in a presentation before. It looks yellow to me. Anyway, in terms of premium pay, the $3,500, has that already been paid?
I'm looking at the secretary's face to see if she can help me here. I do not believe the premium pay has been paid out yet. We were waiting on that one to ensure that this moves forward.
And was the thinking there to pay it out right away, or was the thinking there to create a stay bonus so that you paid it out after they stayed some period of time?
Yeah, very good question, Mr. Orman. I appreciate that. Again, pointing back to Kansas state statute, it's rather restrictive on how we can do that. We can have no strings attached to, I'm going to tell you today that you're going to get a bonus in 8 weeks should you stay. It's sort of, here's the bonus. Certainly hope that folks are wanting to stay around. They've shown a lot of resolve and commitment thus far, and I think the additional $3,500 will put them on a level playing field with the other staff getting the bonuses. So short answer, no, it is not a state bonus that would pay out now, but that's tied to state statute.
And I think I heard you say that while this doesn't technically meet the definition of a bonus pursuant to the state statute, you're trying to comply with it. I guess my point of view is I'm always, and I see this in the private sector a lot, people trying to sort of incent people to stay by paying them bonuses right away. And in my mind, that frankly just sort of gives them wind behind their sails. Often they, that now they've got a chunk of dollars they can use to justify leaving. So I would hate to see that end up backfiring on us where we write folks checks and they leave anyway because there's no incentive tied to staying. So one observation. This is an issue that's been around for 10 years. We've been talking about pay differential issues, particularly in the correction system, for quite some time. We all know that Leavenworth Prison pays a hell of a lot more than Lansing does. And so, someone comes, gets a job at Lansing, gets trained up by us, and then they become a great candidate to go work at Leavenworth or at other facilities. I think any perspective here that these are going to be temporary pay increases is probably not realistic. I mean, I understand we're talking about, putting in levels and making, pulling away some of the dollars if our vacancy rates fall below 25%. But I think anything that we do here, we have to think of as contributing to a permanent increase in pay. And if that's the case and it's the right thing to do, I understand it. But I also then think that we're only dealing with part of the funding issue. And so, in my mind, this doesn't make sense unless there's an absolute commitment on the part of the legislature and the part of the administration to figure out how, through the state general fund, to continue funding these pay increases. Because I think the idea that we think the ones in blue, and is it blue or is it midnight blue? The ones in blue are temporary. I just think it's naive to believe that. I think these are going to end up either being permanent pay increases, or we're going to do what, in my experience, you never do, which is you give people raises and then a year later you say, okay, now we're taking all of this back. And when you do that, it's in my mind, you end up creating very, very dissatisfied employees. So there's a certain rigidity as wages fall, and I just don't see that here. So, I guess my question is a question to legislative leadership and to the lieutenant governor. Is the expectation here that is the state prepared in the state general fund to fund the permanent cost of these increases, and is it the right thing to do?
Lieutenant Governor, do you mind if I understand the question was for the legislative leadership. Do you mind if I address some of the concerns from Mr. Orman before you jump in, or would you before I wait?
Yeah, if Adam, if you take it from the administration side, and then we'll have legislative leadership jump
All right,
in.
thank you very much. And Mr. Orman, I'll speak first to the easy one. I Googled the color, to be honest with you, and I saw that it was maize, but I didn't want to call it blue and maize and have people think I'm a Michigan fan. So I went with goldenrod. That's where that came from. A couple of points that you made and points well taken. I've also spent the majority of my career in the private sector and understand your concerns on paying out a bonus and maybe seeing people take that check and walk out the door and go straight to the bank, never to come back. Hopefully that is not the case here. Again, these folks have shown to be dedicated state employees. And again, this is recognition of what they've done. And again, we're sort of tied to state statute as it relates to bonuses. I've also been in situations where I've been given what you would call a deferred comp bonus. Hey, here's a bonus that you'll get 18 months down the road. Is that meaningful enough for me to stick around and live through the pain for an 18 months to get there? For me, I'd rather just see personally speaking, I'd like to have the bonus in my hand right now, showing the appreciation and being able to stick around, and it boosts morale, my personal opinion. As it relates to temporary versus long-term, fully understand the concerns there. The governor's budget is not yet completely built, nor is it public by any means for fiscal 23, but I can assure you that this has been a discussion. And I think you'll see some level of funding requests for fiscal 23 outside of this committee as we move forward. The reason that we did not swing the pendulum all the way on the base is because once you adjust the base, that is the base. So we thought that we wanted to make some meaningful change on the base. We feel like there's a big step forward there, but then also recognize the additional stress that is coming right now and the additional workload, in hopes that that workload is temporary. So in time, if the workload reduces and the public safety concerns reduce, the additional pay may not be as needed to accommodate all the additional extra hours and or work that folks are picking up. I'm not going to tell you this is a magic panacea and that this is it, and in 6 months the problem goes away. I think that would be naive of me and disingenuous to say. But we wanted to ensure that we had a base pay increase that was meaningful, had some levers that we could pull to see if that works, and certainly readdress this down the road should we need to.
Lieutenant Governor,
Yeah, Mr. Speaker.
thank you. I guess my first question is, what's wrong with being a Michigan fan?
I think my phone just went on mute.
Oh,
A
okay.
lot.
Well, you know, I agree a lot of things being said as far as, I believe whenever you give a pay increase and you take it away, it doesn't end well. But this is something we have to be aware of throughout the entirety of the state government as we're competing with the private sector, with inflation that's coming and the pressure on wages across the state and across all sectors. So this will not be unique to our 24/7 workers. One thing that we need to continue to challenge ourselves, administrative branch, SMART committee, and also the executive branch, is what we're doing to be proactive and think long term. And you know, to answer some of Mr. Holman's questions for the legislature's commitment, we have to be, you know, recommitted to our recidivism programs, our commitment to mental health, the work, all the other programs we have, back to work programs we have inside the space, or look for innovations inside our systems that work with the corrections secretary on ways that we can maybe reconfigure some of our prisons and facilities to do more with less. And so I think the necessity of what we're doing today, it is needed, but we have to continue to look long term, and so we're not just continuing this problem because it is a Band-Aid, and it won't be just for this sector. It'll be for every employee that we have working for the state of Kansas. And so I believe there was about a $60 million SGF request that the governor's going to come forward for the next fiscal year. Is that still accurate to answer Greg's question as far as the commitment from the executive branch to continue this? This is not an additional request from federal SMART funds to be ongoing this.
Mr. Speaker, are you asking if the administration is going to self-fund this within SGF for next year?
Yes, they're going to ask for a supplemental increase, or not supplemental, but an increase in the budget to fund this through state funds going forward.
Yes, I would anticipate a level of funding within the governor's budget as we move forward to put this in fiscal 23.
And it wouldn't be seen as a decrease in pay for these folks that are even including the maize color level.
No, the maize color is there to stay, and we'll need to be able to fund that. Absolutely.
Okay. But we'll be able to, but again, the money that's coming in, your budget request will include the level of funding that can continue this program going forward.
That's correct.
And then it'd be up to the legislature and the legislative process, if they agree, add or subtract from that.
Correct. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
So I think from a legislative perspective, you know, we work with administration to continue this level, but our bigger challenge is the proactive things we can do or continue to do to reduce the folks in our prisons or help the folks in prison stay out of prison and find a job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Masterson, did you want to respond to Mr.
Yeah,
Orman?
I mean, it's, and not a whole lot to add to that. I think the commitment is there in the sense that we've been through this. He's right in the sense we've been through this over the decades, and some of our other hurdles have been, Supreme Court decisions and lawsuits have sucked the oxygen out of the room. I mean, I'm remembering back in 2008 after that crash. I mean, we ended up, we almost weren't even monitoring people on parole. So learned a lesson then that Kansas really does need to focus on its core competencies. Well, the core function of government, right, of public safety. So there is, even though this will have an effect on some other segments of government, those 24/7 facilities in particular, corrections are something we as Kansans have to fund at some level and have to do in an appropriate way. So I think the short answer is yes. I think we will. I mean, there is a commitment there. I was glad to hear that Adam mentioned it will be in the 23 budget and accommodated that way as well. So we're not dealing with it over here on the Spark side. But I think the short answer is yes, there is a commitment there. I would just like to see, there's those assistance and those competing priorities, right? We're Kansas is in somewhat of a unique position where there's these outside pressures on areas that are not necessarily at the same level of priority as corrections.
Thank you, Mr. President. Other questions or comments from the executive committee members?
I'll just make one more comment following on that, and that is to say, I'm open to supporting this proposal this time, but I think it's a slippery slope when we start to look to the Spark Committee to sort of solve problems that have been problems that Kansas has needed to resolve for a decade or more. And so what I would just suggest is that we make sure that as we get closer to the legislative session, if we have any other similar type requests, that we don't bring them to Spark, but you figure out a way to get it done through the state general fund, which now I think is sitting on a $2 billion surplus.
Thank you, Mr. Orman.
Lieutenant Governor, I'd actually echo those sentiments. That was my initial hesitation with this, was that, salaries in this manner in general are not they're an ongoing thing. And when we're back in session, they really do need to be accommodated through the normal budget process. But to the same sentiment, I'm willing to do this particular one right now for this time. But I would like to see any ongoing salaries in pretty much any segment of state government handled through our normal processes.
Okay, thank you.
Lieutenant Governor, I would just echo those concerns. I have a real concern that we're getting onto a very slippery slope here as the needs of the state's budget start to become more manifest, particularly in this era of tight labor and challenges that all agencies and frankly, all private enterprise are dealing with right now. So I don't see how this is necessarily a one-time Spark eligible type of expenditure. I admit this is a critical need. It's been a critical need in the state for a long time. I think everybody should be well aware of the challenges in the corrections budget. I do have a question about the process in terms of that 25% cliff. I guess I'd hate to be the new employee that starts that throws the facility over the 25 or under the 25% vacancy rate, and then results in a $2.50 decrease or whatever it was per employee. I mean, could you imagine being that guy that starts and then everybody gets a $2.50 cut in pay? I don't understand the logic of that at all. But again, my major concern is that this is not what the Spark Committee was supposed to be doing, and I recognize that we have a labor issue right now throughout this country, and I'm disappointed that we're going down this path at all. And I have a problem with it, I guess.
Actually, following up on that, is that meant to be automatic? What Bill brought up actually, is that reduction? If you can, we don't want to have an employee walk in and everybody else gets a $2.50 decrease. I guess the way my mind saw that is new oncoming employees after you've broken through that barrier that it would no longer be offered in addition. But for those that have reached that level and were there when it was in that condition, is it the intention of the administrator? I mean, is that meant to be automatic, or those that receive it?
Ty, I wouldn't worry about that. They'll all band together and get a guy to quit and agree to pay.
I'm worried about it now. Where we started.
Mr. President, if I can address your question and Mr. Pickett directly, the short answer is that is a measurement that we are looking at. It is not a hard and fast. It's just a level that we put in place. At some point, there is, the +1, it goes away, whether that's 25%, 20%, 18%, 12%. There's always sort of that cliff where the differential goes away. 25% is the threshold that we are looking at. Certainly open to discussion and ensuring that we are doing what is right for the facility and for the employees at the time. Public safety
goes away for the new employees coming in, not those that have already reached it, or everybody. What's the intention there?
I do not want to overcommit without talking to Secretary Burns Wallace and then our OPS personnel services. But again, the intent is to ensure that we're taking care of the folks in the facilities, whether it's the veterans home, the state hospitals, or public safety at the corrections. 25% is a threshold. We can wiggle a little bit one side or the other.
Ty, the way I read it is everybody's pay gets cut once they cross the 25% threshold. So I read it, not the way that you've described it, but the other way. And I think you probably need to think about it, and it's probably not immediate. It might be at the end of the month. It might be at the end of the quarter. But I don't think you can go ahead and have somebody relying on that $2.50 an hour and say, because we hired Larry on Monday, you're not going to get it in your paycheck on Friday.
And this is Secretary Burns Wallace. Please know it's not a hard and fast, and it's not a one-to-one. It's also over a period of time. And in the facilities that we're talking about, these are things that are actually used for various other reasons. They have a tipping point in which the staffing hits certain levels and they have to make then certain adjustments because they are down so many. And once they hit a certain, so for instance, shifts go from 8 to 12 hours because they are so low in terms of it. And then they have a point in which once they pass that level, then those shifts move back from 12 to 8. So we're using triggers and levers that are similar to what they use already in their environment. My director of personnel services is on if there's additional questions there. But please know it's not a Monday to Friday thing. You look at it over a period of time. You're looking at it for it to be level. We have a lot of movement across our agencies and in these agencies. So on a Monday, it would look one way, and on a Friday, it would look different, and the next Monday, it could look different again. So it'll be across a period of time. It'll be something that is smoothed across. You're looking for consistency, staying above a certain percentage for a period of time to know that they are actually maintaining and growing, because the whole point of this is to help to stabilize, not to create more volatility into the process. So hopefully that helps.
It does. And I think a layer of comfort I have is we'll obviously probably work some of these logistics through the regular legislative process over the next few months.
Yes, that's my concern also, is that we're kind of overriding the legislative process and the legislature. This is clearly something that belongs in the normal general fund expenditures. And I just, a little bit worried about bringing on the resentment of the legislature for the spark going in and doing something that, for whatever reason, the legislature wasn't willing to do on its own. And so I think we've got to be very careful when we start doing these kinds of things.
Mr. Pickard, I appreciate your comments and concern there. What I would say is that the dollars that have come through the American Rescue Plan Act, we've set a guiding principle that whenever possible, we'd like to make long-term, one-time investments. These dollars also, though, are here for us to respond to the immediate impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, whether we're talking about health impacts or the broader economic impacts that have created pressures in our economy. And so I think that's what we have here, where there is an immediate concern, an immediate need, which is, are we able to fulfill our obligation to preserve the health and the safety of individuals who are in the care of the state or the custody of the state. And that's who we're talking about here. It's the health of individuals. You know, we've got charts here that are in goldenrod and maize and midnight blue that can get kind of arcane and dry, but at the end of the day, this is about making sure that we can keep people in the care and the custody of the state safe and healthy. And so I see an immediate need and would like to ask for a motion to approve the proposal.
This is Secretary Burns-Wallace. I would make that motion to propose the a proposal for the 24/7 play plan as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion.
Lieutenant Governor, the only thing I would add, I understand your point that in some senses there is a connection here to the pandemic. But again, I want to reiterate, I think every department or agency of state government could make that same argument as it relates to labor shortages. And so while there is a connection here, and I grant you that, I'm also, again, concerned that we start addressing what are long-term needs through one-time spark dollars. And again, I'll support this proposal, but hope it's the last time we have to do something that is really not in what I think would be the center of the bullseye as it relates to what we want to do with spark dollars.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Orman. I understand and agree. As a department head, you know, there are pressures on all state agencies, but the state agencies that we're talking about here are the ones that are, you know, that have a unique charge to take care of, you know, some of our most vulnerable Kansans. And so it's different from what I do at the Department of Commerce or Secretary Burns-Wallace at the Department of Administration. But thank you. I appreciate your point. Other comments? Okay, call the vote. President Masterson?
Aye.
Speaker Reichman?
Aye.
Secretary Burns-Wallace?
Aye.
Mr. Orman?
Aye.
Mr. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Rolfe?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you all. Our last agenda item is the Hospital Employee Retention Program report. Secretary Burns-Wallace, do you have that for us?
I do. I just wanted to give everyone a quick update, and we have some things that we're going to be sending out, but we wanted to kind of let everyone know what was in there as we started to collect the reporting that's coming in. So as a reminder, there were 122 hospitals that were eligible, 118 submitted and all approved, and all of the dollars have been moved out to those hospitals. So everyone has their dollars in hand. And all 118 submitted their reports as requested to the office. Of those 118, for instance, if you remember, a few of the things that Spark had asked for was around any policies, summaries of their policies in areas of vaccination, testing, quarantine. Just to give you an example, and why I'm kind of giving this overview instead of just sending everything out. Of 118 hospitals, we received 114 policies around vaccination, 115 around testing, 115 around quarantine. Some hospitals sent us kind of summaries and links. Other ones sent us full-on PDFs. So we've tried to put the information together in a way, one, that you all can go through it and then search and do some deep dives. What I will say is, as we provided, if there are questions or if there's something you're looking for, if you'll let the RO office know, they may have it. They were just trying to put the information together in a way that you can sort through. You can imagine with multiple things and everyone providing in slightly different ways. Even when you provide format, institutions still provide it in many different ways. The other data that's come in as requested is around voluntary and involuntary separation. we're collecting information around the known terms for that separation, terminations, as well as reasons for leaving, what they've been able to collect. Also, part of the data that was asked for was around the number of contracted beds. And I think it was, if I remember correctly, for both of these categories, we have data again for all 18 hospitals. That was, I think, June to August, and then they have a September and October. We don't have November data yet because their reporting for November data is due December 15th, but we do have basically everything through October. So just know it's, we were looking for ways to kind of put it together where it was succinct enough where you could go through it. So it's a couple of Excel files. Some of them have links out, and some of them will note, larger file or, large PDF document on file with the office. And so if there's questions there, we can pull those. And we're looking for a way maybe that we can drop them in a box where you could, kind of go into it and pull what you needed. Just understanding a lot of pieces of information, but all of it is coming in. All of the hospitals that have received their dollars, they're providing the information that you requested, and we're ready to push that out to you for you all can work through it and ask questions or things of that nature. So look for that to come out. And then once you receive it, please let us know if you have questions or if there's other things that we can help provide around that information. Again, what you'll see in this first pass will take you through October. We will keep refining it. After December 15th, the November information will come in, it'll be added. So, and I can stand for any questions. And if I can't answer them, we'll make sure we get back to the group.
I have a quick question, Lieutenant Governor.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. President.
So, and some of what the committee, at least from my perspective, some of what I was asking early on with that 50 is less relevant now because, the people have been winning in court against some of the mandates, and the legislature has taken some action from a state law perspective. But how up to date are those? You said we haven't had reports from the, especially some of what they reported along their vaccine policies and termination policies. Are they from October, policies from October? Or are they subsequent to court proceedings and legislative action, more current?
So the way that we've asked them to report, what you would see in this first pass would be through October 31st. What we ask is at every month when they do so when they submit their November, if they've had any update in policies, they are supposed to update that information for us accordingly. So so understanding we are a month behind, but as that comes in, it should update. And it might be, again, they're sending it in different ways. It might be an updated document, but some will just send us, this part has been striked or this part has been added to the original policy of something of that nature. So we're getting it many different ways, but that is one stipulation that any of the data points, including the policies, when they do their monthly check-in, if anything has changed, then they are supposed to update that information accordingly. So hopefully that'll help answer and get to it. But what you will see in that first pass, this is all the data that brought us through October. So it would have been of that through October 31. So you're right. There's probably a few of them that might be a little bit out of date now, but we'll catch up.
Right. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor, I also have a question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. When we had this discussion, especially on premium pay and supplement our nurses, we talked about getting some participation from the locals that receive federal money. How successful were we on the locals also contributing to the pot of money that helped for pay increases and other ways to alleviate what was going on with our nurses in our hospitals?
Speaker Reichman, let me get some more information. I know that there were a number, because I can see it on one of our more detailed spreadsheets where they had identified like funds coming in from other places, or that there were, I don't want to say matching like dead on, but other entities that were supporting into a particular program. But I don't know that we have that clean enough to pull out. So let us see if we can pull any of that information out. And then we can share what we can find in that space. I don't know that we have it consistently either, so we can see what we can do.
I think maybe a number would be good, because I know we're just trying to stretch that $50 million. Originally, I suggested having a lower amount of money that would be matched, and was successful with that motion, but still we were going to try to stretch that 50. So I was wondering if we did find any matches from the locals that we were going to go after and see if we were successful. Thank you.
Any other questions for Secretary Burns-Wallace? Okay, well, before we adjourn, are there any other matters that members of the Executive Committee would like to bring forward?
I'd like to recognize that Speaker Reichman is celebrating a milestone birthday here the next week, and just wanted to congratulate him and wish him a happy birthday.
Well, happy 21st, Mr. Speaker.
And we feel bad that you always had to have your birthday presents and Christmas presents so close together.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I do enjoy birthday presents wrapped in Christmas paper.
Excellent. Okay, well, hearing no other issues, we will adjourn for today. I want to thank everybody for another thoughtful conversation. We're making progress. I think the pace of our work is going to accelerate pretty dramatically as we head into 2022 and we have our working groups kick into gear. We're going to need to get going quickly on orientation for those members so that they can hit the ground running in December. And I'm really pleased having John Paralysi on board and what that means for our ability to move at a faster clip and get some dollars out. So we've got important investments that need to be made. We've got, as we've said, a once in a lifetime opportunity to do big things that can meaningfully improve the lives of Kansans across this state. So excited to see what's coming next. So stay tuned. Thank you all. We will, I guess I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thanks so much.
Happy holidays.